On this channel, we have already dissected the best performances in history. But today, we go one step further, towards something more extreme and virtuous: acting duels. Those collisions where two legends, willing to die for the role of a lifetime, came face to face with a rival seeking exactly the same. The result was a war of intensity, and an interpretive quality almost impossible to believe. This isn't just sharing a scene. It is a collision of egos, a struggle for air, where two titans devour each other in front of the camera until the screen burns. Get ready. After watching these duels, any individual performance will seem like children's theater.
So you never wanted a regular type life?
The fuck is that? Barbecues and ball games?
Yeah.
In 1995, the world stopped. For the first time in history, the two greatest forces of nature of their generation, Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, shared the same frame. They did it in a cafeteria, in broad daylight, without weapons, only with words. Michael Mann had the intelligence not to give us a conventional action scene, but a duel of minds. Neil McCauley's cold, restrained elegance clashes head-on with Vincent Hanna's histrionic and erratic intensity. It is Predator versus Predator. There is no music, no gimmicks, just two men who recognize each other as equals in a world that no longer understands them. The tension is so real, you can feel the weight of the silence between their sentences. De Niro uses minimalism, communicating with a blink what others would do with a monologue. Pacino, on the contrary, seems on the verge of exploding, maintaining control by an invisible thread. It is a choreography of mutual respect and shared condemnation. At that table, both confess they will kill each other if necessary, saying it with the casualness of someone commenting on the weather. It is the climax of genre cinema, two myths who stop being actors to become two sides of the same coin.
You bloody maniac! You could have killed me!
Tush, not dead-eyed Wyke, the demon gunman of Cloak Manor. Now.
In Sleuth, a single room was enough to create one of the most legendary acting confrontations in history. On one side, Laurence Olivier, the embodiment of Shakespearean prestige, the old lion of British theatre. On the other, a young Michael Caine, symbol of the new wave, modern charisma, and the break with the past. What happens in that mansion full of automata and macabre games is a war of humiliations. Olivier plays an intellectual aristocrat who despises Caine's humble origins, while Caine uses his freshness and confidence to gradually dismantle his rival's arrogance. The film stands solely on their shoulders. They need nothing else. Every dialogue feels like a psychological chess match where the retorts fall like fencing thrusts. Olivier is gargantuan, theatrical, and poisonous, while Caine proves he can look the greatest legend of his time in the eye without blinking. A confrontation where the viewer never truly knows who is in control, until it is already too late.
For real?
Yes, naturally. When the police come, I have to show them a real lump.
To understand what happens in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, one must accept that what we see on screen is not just acting. It is a duel between two actresses who hated each other with demonic intensity. The film locks us in a decadent mansion with two sisters, former child stars trapped in an eternal cycle of envy and abuse. Jane, a mentally disintegrated woman who refuses to abandon her past as a child prodigy, psychologically and physically tortures her sister Blanche, who is confined to a wheelchair. It is the most toxic acting duel in history, because the poison they hurl at each other was not born in the script, but in decades of professional and personal hatred that Hollywood could never contain. While the performances are masterful, the true duel occurred off-camera. Bette Davis, pure technique and volcanic character, despised Joan Crawford's calculated beauty and star status. It is said that Davis installed a Coca-Cola machine on set just to annoy Crawford, whose husband was a Pepsi executive. During the abuse scenes, the realism was terrifying. In one scuffle sequence, Davis hit Crawford with such force that she needed stitches. Crawford, in silent and technical revenge, filled her pockets with lead weights during a scene where Davis had to drag her, seeking to wreck her rival's back. To watch this duel is to witness how two titans use their art to destroy each other, giving us a work where acting becomes indistinguishable from reality.
This wasn't enough time, Michael. Wasn't enough time.
We'll get there, Pop. We'll get there.
In The Godfather, the most iconic and transcendental duel in cinema occurs. Marlon Brando, the old patriarch, the god of the method, faces the mirror of his own heritage in a young Al Pacino. Vito Corleone is authority that no longer needs to shout to be law, a man who has turned the weight of his sins into a mystical presence, while Michael is the restraint trying to deny his nature until destiny claims him. The film is built on the gaze of a son observing his father to understand the price of survival. Unlike other entries, in this duel, we do not see a clash of egos, but a dance of silences and minimal gestures. Brando acts from the fatigue of one who knows the end, filling the frame with a twilight warmth. Pacino does it from the void, filming how the light of innocence fades in his eyes to give way to absolute coldness. The climax of this duel is the garden scene, where a father confesses the failure of his hopes to his son. It is a filmed Greek tragedy, where Coppola's mastery of staging allows Brando's vulnerability and Pacino's nascent coldness to merge into a single flow of melancholy. It is the perfection of staging at the service of a fatality regarding power, time, and the irreparable loss of identity.
Performance tonight looked like an Easter pageant. I want you to get yourself a little alert, down a little life in you.
Stop that!
Pull yourself together.
Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf takes place over a single night, where a couple trapped in years of frustration, alcohol, and resentment invites two young people to their home, only to drag them into a spiral of humiliations, psychological games, and unbearable truths. But what is truly unrepeatable is that this emotional hell was sustained by reality. Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton were Hollywood's most extreme, chaotic, and obsessive couple. The film functions as a filmed self-destruction. Burton plays a man consumed by failure and wounded pride, while Taylor delivers the fiercest performance of her career. Vulgar, manipulative, devastating, and deeply sad all at once. Every dialogue feels like an open wound. Every insult sounds too real. It doesn't feel like they are playing characters. It feels like they are using cinema to destroy each other in front of the audience. And therein lies the greatness of the duel. It is an emotional war where both actors push each other to nearly unbearable levels of vulnerability. Mike Nichols turns the black and white into a psychological prison where love and hate are already indistinguishable. The result is one of the cruelest, most intimate, and devastating acting confrontations ever filmed.
Nej, nu ska du prata! Om du har någonting att säga ska du jävla rinna!
Bergman reduces cinema to two faces, and, even so, seems to contain within them all the complexity of the human soul. Persona follows an actress who has suddenly decided to stop speaking, and the nurse in charge of caring for her in an isolated house by the sea. However, here we are no longer talking about a duel between two actresses. We are talking about a duel within the soul, played by Bibi Andersson, who screams the truths, and the persona, the mask, played by Liv Ullmann, who maintains a vow of silence. It is the yin and yang, two halves of the same being who desperately need to merge but are incapable. Andersson acts through words, fragility, and the desperate need to be heard, while Ullmann turns silence into one of the most hypnotic performances in history. Her motionless face seems to hide an abyss impossible to decipher. Every gaze between them has the intensity of an intimate confession and the violence of a psychological attack. The moment their faces overlap on screen is the definitive image of the dissolution of the self. It is a duel that transcends the actresses themselves because, rather than acting, they channeled the universal struggle of the soul fragmented into two bodies that needs to merge to return to unity.
Of the third revelation as your spiritual guide. Get out of here!
I am a firm defender that Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in There Will Be Blood is insuperable, and if this duel is not in the first position, it is because, quite frankly, it is not equaled. Paul Thomas Anderson films a duel of wills here that transcends the screen to become a biblical clash between extreme capitalism and religious fanaticism. It is a modern Macbeth without castles or crowns, only ambition, oil, and absolute solitude. Plainview is the wolf that devours the earth, while Eli is the serpent that coils around the souls of men. The conflict is not just over a plot of land in California, it is over who owns the truth. Daniel Day-Lewis delivers an interpretation of a tectonic scale. Paul Dano manages to look the greatest actor in history in the eye and not be intimidated. However, as I already mentioned, the duel is not 100% equal. No duel involving Day-Lewis can be equal. The climax in the bowling alley is, without exaggeration, the most brutal scene of the decade. A duel of final humiliations where language becomes a weapon of mass destruction.
I am the third revelation. I am the third revelation.
The mountains, you remember all that?
One shot.
One shot. One shot.
Before being a film about the Vietnam War, The Deer Hunter is a tragedy about the destruction of the male soul. The acting duel is an open wound between trauma and madness. On one side, Robert De Niro, absolute restraint, the man trying to hold together the pieces of his own soul as he watches his world disintegrate. On the other, Christopher Walken, in the most disturbing performance of his career, a man who is no longer there, whose spirit has been devoured by horror until becoming an empty shell that only responds to the stimulus of death. The Russian roulette scene is a technical and emotional miracle. De Niro's intensity, sweating pain and desperation as he tries to bring his friend back, clashes against Walken's gaze, eyes that have already seen the other side and have decided to stay there. Walken does not blink, does not feel. He only smiles with a manic lucidity that curdles the blood. It is a duel where there is no struggle, only the purest friendship of two men trying to survive in a world that has already died.
Har du någonsin brytt dig om någon annan levande varelse än själv? Om du verkligen önskat dig ett barn hade jag aldrig kunnat tvinga dig till abort. Hade jag sett emot?
Ingmar Bergman reduces the universe to a single room to film the autopsy of a sacred bond. In Autumn Sonata, we witness the definitive duel between a mother, Charlotte, a successful pianist who only knows how to love her own ego, and her daughter, Ava, who has spent her life languishing in the shadow of an effective absence. The duel becomes an emotional torture, where the repressed, the hate, and the unspoken come to light in the most painful way possible. The technique of the staging, close-ups that strip every pore of skin and every fracture of the gaze, forces us to witness what normally remains hidden in familial silence. Ingrid Bergman delivers her best performance, from the elegance of one who protects herself with her own talent, while Liv Ullmann responds from a vulnerability that transforms into a fury contained for decades. The piano scene is the visual definition of contempt and injury. The mother correcting the daughter's technique is not an act of teaching, but a public execution of the other's spirit. Watching these two legends devour each other through dialogue, hurling truths like fencing thrusts, is a mystical experience.
I give you facts.
You don't give
They
me
are not
facts.
opinions.
What facts?
They are fucking facts!
What facts?
Fuck you!
What facts?
Fuck you!
In The Master, something unprecedented in the history of cinema occurs. Two of the greatest performances of all time come together, giving rise to a war for control of the very soul. Paul Thomas Anderson places head-to-head the two most imposing forces of nature of the 21st century, Joaquin Phoenix and Philip Seymour Hoffman. It is the clash between absolute chaos and absolute control. Phoenix plays Freddie Quell, a wounded animal, a creature of primary instincts dragging himself through life, intoxicated by alcohol and trauma. Facing him, Hoffman is Lancaster Dodd, the cult leader, an architect of wills who uses words and charisma to domesticate the darkness of others while hiding his own. What happens in the famous processing scene is, without discussion, the best acting duel in the history of cinema. Without blinking, without cuts, the camera stays fixed while Dodd subjects Quell to an interrogation that is, in reality, open-heart surgery. Phoenix writhes, his face a mask of pain and nervous laughter, while Hoffman holds him with an almost divine gravity, hitting him with questions that seek the core of his existence. It is the tamer versus the beast. The mastery of this duel lies in interdependence. Dodd needs Quell's savagery to validate his doctrine, and Quell needs Dodd's structure to keep from disintegrating. It is a duel so perfect and complex that it allows for hours of analysis. I have a video where I dissect why it is the best duel of all time. I invite you to watch it.
Why don't you go back?
I don't know.
Why don't you go
I don't know.
Close your eyes.
If you have felt the vibration of these images, if you understand that cinema is the last refuge of truth, this is your place. Subscribe, explore the rest of my analyses, and tell me in the comments, which duel transcends the screen for you? The inactivity is over. I'll see you very soon.